there are times when, well, honestly, 90% of the time, that plastic will by far get the most bites. But the deal with the jig is, there are times when those fish are actually not that active, that I feel like if I drop that jig in front of a big one, she'll bite it, because it's a big meal and it's easy for her to catch. Where if I might, you know, actually flip a rodent or, you know, a coffee tube or something else in front of her, she won't bite it. So, and I just feel like when if I can get 10 jig bites over 20 other bites, like any other bait, my chances of catching a better average fish are, you know, and it may not be 7 8 pounders, but it may be 3.5 pounders instead of 2.5 pounders. And so I'm just really confident, you know, when I can get them going on a jig, that's the deal. And this particular jig, the Hack Attack jig, is, you know, it's designed to fish in matted grass, heavy wood. It's got a 27-degree line tie, and what that does, that puts that line tie almost center of that head. So what it's actually done two things. It goes in and out of cover real easy, but the main thing it does, there's a big gap between the hook point and the eye. And a lot of people don't notice that, but I've studied jigs for a long time, and what'll happen is, if that line tie is turned at a 90 or a 60, it's covered up half of your bite on your hook point. Where this one right out of the, when I fold that weed guard down, there's nothing in the way of that hook point. I mean, so I know when I drive that hook, it's going. And what I've had in the past, and especially with a big weighted jig, like say this is actually a 3/4. What'll happen, you got all that head of that jig and then that line tie's in the way, and you'll stick those fish hard and you got them coming and they come off. And what happens is you actually stick the line tie in the roof of their mouth. You pin it right up there in that tooth patch on the top of their lip. And it feels like they're hooked, but the hook's never got closed. So what the deal is, you want that line tie to come on out so that hook can penetrate. You know, you basically, you don't have to move it far to get that hook to go in. The other deal is that heavy hook. And what it does, now that hook is as sharp as any fine wire hook out there, but it has an extra heavy shaft on it. And what happens is, a lot of times when you're putting a lot of pressure on a fish in heavy cover up close, the hook will actually flex. Now it may not flex out to the point where you can see it bent, but what'll happen, and where that hook point touches and it flexes, it'll cut its way out of that fish's mouth. And what'll happen sometimes, you know, that fish will completely have that bait engulfed, but he's hooked out here after that, because it's cut all the way out. So with a hook that, you know, that's strong, that won't flex, wherever it starts to penetrate, that's where it's going in, because it's not going to open up. So the only other way it can go is in whichever direction it's pointed. So that's the reason that, you know, we made that jig with that heavy hook. This hook was actually designed to catch tuna offshore. You know, so it'll really take a pounding. And you know, it's funny, you say, well, why would you need a tuna hook in a jig? But again, it goes back to that unconscious period in life when you get that big bite in that grass or in that top, and that fish slacks the line, and you're standing up there with a 7.5 to an 8-foot pole with 30-pound mono or 30-pound fluorocarbon or 80-pound braid, and just all of a sudden you forget about everything you know about fishing, and all your body tells you is to jerk as hard as you can. And so again, that hook will make up for some human error. But that's one thing about the jig. It just catches a little bit better average fish. And see, that's what I'm talking about. I mean, right where there's no cut place in that fish's mouth, right where that hook penetrated in that hard part of his mouth, there's no way that fish is coming off.